Should we talk now? Like, I don't think we actually talked about dating. Don't date feminists.
No, we didn't talk about dating and don't date feminists. Can I talk about my book for a minute?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I can show it, I think.
Okay.
I hope.
The only reason I want to bring it, I don't want to talk about my book because that's boring. But
your book is offensive.
It is offensive. It's The Tactical Guide to Women is the most. It's a misogynistic sounding title. But if you get in, you read the introduction. Even if you read as much as the subtitle, it starts to come into focus. This is not a misogynistic book. But the reason I wrote this book is because I found in my clinical practice so many guys ending up in family court or divorced or just miserable at home or alcoholic or addicted to different things or having anxiety disorders, depression, and so much of it comes back to the choice of the women that they bring into their lives. And so I wrote a book that apparently
The Tactical Guide to Women.
Yeah, it's been well received apparently, where I talk a lot about how to vet women for, who you're going to allow into your inner circle. You should be very selective about who you allow into your inner circle, especially someone who's in such an intimate position as a female partner. What were you going to say?
My first question is, have they written smears about this book? Because I can just see how easy it would be to write.
Shockingly, no. I actually was hoping that some radical, angry feminists would give me some free publicity, but there's really not much to object to in here. I'm saying men should be selective and they should look for character. Well, if you argue against that, you're sort of indicting yourself as someone who's not worthy of being in someone else's life.
But it's men-centric, so I can imagine.
So maybe it's coming. I just haven't encountered it yet.
So, you explained basically the gist of it, but I don't know. You want to elaborate? I guess because we can get into the hard don't date feminists, but we can ease into that, or we can just jump off the diving board.
Well, I can give you the gist of the book is that there are some basic characteristics that you should look for, including shared values and the ability, things like maturity and the ability to navigate relationships and conflict and so forth. Guys are not really taught to look for these things. Women are very good they're marginally better than us at talking to their daughters about the character of the men that they bring into their life.
Oh, yeah, good point.
When I ask men, who taught you how to select women, the answer is always just a blank stare. Nobody taught them. So they emulate what they see, or they just follow their instinct. Or I was walking past a TV, Target or something, and there was some sort of dating reality show, and I just caught a clip of this guy talking about a woman and saying, well, it'll happen when it happens, and I'll know when it's right. And that is such a powerless way to make decisions about one of the most important decisions you're ever going to make in your life if you're thinking about marriage. And I thought to myself, that guy's going to family court. I don't know who he's talking about, but I know he's going to family court at some point. And so the book is really to help men make intelligent decisions about who they bring into life. So getting back to dating feminism.
Well, is the first chapter, 1, don't date a feminist?
No, I don't talk about the negative side and so much the things to avoid, because that stuff is out there. The 14 red flags to avoid in women or whatever.
Yeah.
No, that's marginally useful, but what's more useful is knowing what to look for. Looking for signs of character and maturity and the ability to navigate difficulties and how men and women function well together generally. And the first part of the book, actually, to answer your question, is a lot about your mission, you as the reader, because mission is so important to a man's life. Like, nothing works if you don't have your mission in order. Your job doesn't work, your relationships don't work. And so my first 3 chapters are about, let's get your act together before you even think about who you bring into your life.
Clean your own room before you try to change the world.
Who said that?
Jordan Peterson.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
But yeah. So then what is it specifically about feminists? And I'll clarify too, just before, it's the woke intersectional, more extreme.
Yeah, not the person who calls herself a feminist because she believes in accountability and so forth. Yeah, you should date that person provided the values are lined up and she has all the other prerequisites. Yeah. But the angry, bitter, sad, victimized feminists, the most obvious problem with dating anybody who has an ideology that says I'm the victim and I'm being mistreated is that once the honeymoon is over, guess who the oppressor is? Because this person has to have an oppressor.
Yep.
And if this person is thinking that men in general are my oppressor, and then the honeymoon starts to fade, which is somewhere between 12 and 18 months, our brain chemistry starts to reach its baseline, and we start to see the other person as a real person, not as an idealized person, then at that point, and I've seen this like clockwork, when couples come in and the woman has a
Victimhood.
identitarian feminist ideology that finds its way into the relationship. And I don't see that a whole lot because, frankly, there's not a lot of hardcore feminists off campus and functioning in the real world because it's such a dysfunctional way of going through the world that
Right.
people don't have much tolerance for it other than on campus. You're celebrated on campus, but it always finds its way into the relationship, and then the man becomes the oppressor. And you can't argue with somebody constructively if they think that you are mistreating them at every turn.
Right. Do you think that there's an inverse to that? Like, is there a version for women? You could say, like, is there certain men they shouldn't date?
Yeah, and I actually have written
Same thing,
book.
toxic feminist male.
Yeah, I wrote a book called The Practical Guide to Men. It's gotten a lot less press. The Tactical Guide to Women has done very well for me, so it's clearly filling some kind of a niche out there. But yeah, there are men that women probably shouldn't date. Well, going through the checklist, he has to be able to navigate difficulties, and he should probably be a little bit stoic so he can handle things, and he should have his mission in order, because if he doesn't have his mission in order, then you don't really know who you're dating. And this is more characteristic of men than women, that men need to have that in place to be able to function well.
That's interesting because I've never heard it from a clinical or an academic standpoint, but I've always described my mission that way. Like, I have a mission, I have a plan, I know what I'm doing, and I'm navigating various paths, but I've always, my entire life, had a quest that I've been on. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if that is one of the reasons why millennial men have been, maybe it's fair to be so hard on them as I am, but so many have kind of been like lost or ineffective or reclusive. It's because they've never found their mission.
Yeah.
In reference to this, we mentioned Jordan Peterson. One of the things I've said in the past is that I think Jordan Peterson fills the role of a loss of purpose because we've become so comfortable and successful in our lives. So now you have people who are lost, who have nothing to live for, and he says, find the heaviest thing you can and carry it.
Yes.
And that's them finding their mission.
Yes.
And then to bring it back to dating, I wonder if one of the reasons, if there's like a causational or correlational effect between a lot of these women who hate men and being surrounded by ineffective, missionless men. So then they in turn resent them and think men are bad, right?
How could you not resent somebody if you're in that position and you're with somebody that you know that, well, you don't know that, but I take it as a given that a man has to have his mission in order for his life to function correctly. And if he's not taking care of himself, which is getting his mission in order, keeping his body in order, having something that he's working toward, how could you not get a little bit resentful towards someone like that?
Well, yeah. So in turn, women shouldn't date men without a mission, or is there a better way? Or
well,
men
it's
should find their
tricky
mission?
because young guys in their 20s, they're not all like you, and so maybe part of what you see among millennials is that young guys in general have to struggle a little bit. Most of us have to struggle a little bit to find our mission. So it can look like a guy in his 20s is aimless when really he's working pretty hard to figure out where he's going. He just doesn't have his direction yet. And that really stinks about being in your 20s for most guys, is that you are at a position where now you are expected, you're expected to know where you're going, but you don't know where you're going yet.
Yeah.
And it's a tough place to be in.
I mean, I feel like when I was in my 20s, my early 20s, I was, bouncing around. I was in LA. Mm-hmm. I was briefly homeless. I, moved across the country a couple times, but I still had a mission. And it's not like I had a roadmap where I'm like, I'm going to be here in 5 years. It was kind of like, I must remain focused.
You were going forward.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So, to the outside, viewer, it might seem like I was aimless.
Right. Yeah.
But to me, it was like I'm, essentially putting out feelers and trying to figure out where the path is.
Yeah, and I bet that was apparent to anyone who was watching you at the time.
I guess maybe, yeah. I was always doing stuff. I right before I went down to New York for Occupy Wall Street, I was actually starting to make YouTube skate videos, and then went to Occupy Wall Street, and then that kind of changed everything. But I was always trying to figure out what should I be doing, what can I be doing, So to bring it back to the dating thing too, because I don't want to deviate too much. There's an interesting idea that a lot of people have talked about in that when all of these women, younger women, are surrounding themselves with weak men. Nice guys, angry guys, men who are abiding by, like, say, what the American Psychological Association, did I get it right this time?
Yeah.
You have men who are following this feminist sort of doctrine of how you should behave, you shouldn't be stoic, you should let out your emotions, and then they end up getting angry at the women for not behaving the way they expect them to behave, the women then say all men are bad, right? Because they're surrounded by them.
Yeah.
So these feminist types are surrounded by these weak, ineffective, nice guys who make them angry and resentful. And that's because it's the only men they see. They then say, all men are abusers, all men are this way, or most men tend to be. So then when you see it was something I saw on Twitter a while ago when I started looking at the meme that was reset the clock, when male feminists turn out to be abusers. It's like, well, no wonder feminists think all men are bad. They've surrounded themselves by these feminist men who are bad. So now that's their world. It's what they experience. The
feminist men that you're asserting, and I wouldn't disagree, that they have that nice guy
right.
Cluster of behaviors, that covert sort of aggression and just
right.
just that bitterness.
Well, it's like you have these guys who they're not necessarily weak, but they think they're on the right path, and then when they find out they're not, they get really angry. It's like what did you mention before? Like a cost fallacy, that you've invested so much into this.
Sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah.
Sunk cost fallacy. You've invested so much into this that now that it's backfiring on you, you're furious, you're angry. And so now these feminists are surrounded by these men who are seeing its backfire.
Yeah.
Like you see so many, I don't want to get too much into it, but with polyamory, I can respect honest polyamory to a certain extent, but you have a lot of instances of what people refer to as a cuck. Right.
Yes, and that's one of the things that I have worked with the kink community, because what happened early in my practice is someone came in and they were part of the kink community, and I got really curious, like, how does this work? Because I feel like I didn't know how to really work with the specifics of their situation. So I said, show me around, take me. So I went to some dungeons and I went to some clubs and I started talking to people and figuring out how this works. And some part of it I can wrap my head around. Polyamory is one that I really have trouble wrapping my head around from a male perspective, because
exactly
I cannot even fathom sharing my wife with anybody. I'm toxic, I guess. And, I'm very possessive. Like the thought of that, it kind of makes me a little crazy. So it's to your point. I don't quite get it.
But this is something you typically will see more among the feminists and the left. So I can only imagine, why would a woman need to go to another man to be satisfied?
I don't think there's a single answer for that. I think people like variety, and that's a big factor. But I get what you're moving toward here, that there's something she's not getting at home.
Yeah. And I want to make sure it's clear. I'm not saying everyone is uniform. Right. Everybody has different preferences.
Right.
I have a bunch of friends who are, I have a few friends who are dominatrixes. What's the plural for this? And people who are into kink and BDSM. And I'm super libertarian. Like, you do you be happy.
Yeah.
But what I think, what I'm trying to get at is that there's at least a subset of men who are weak, effeminate, and resentful and angry because everything they've been taught to do didn't work.
Yes.
And so then these other women are like, I'm going to go somewhere else and not give it to you. So they get really angry.
Yeah.
It's actually interesting, because I remember when I was really young, I remember experiencing something like this. You see in all of these movies and romantic comedies, the chivalrous man, milady, doing all these nice things. And it's like not the way your people are supposed to act.
That guy's repulsive.
Right, exactly.
He's attractive at first, but down the road, he's repulsive. Because what does he stand for? He stands for pleasing everybody. That's not an attractive quality.
Agreeableness.
Yeah.
So I guess the question is, someone like that would just bend the knee to anybody, and they're not going to take charge and defend you when the bear shows up. They're going to be like, whatever you want, bear, you eat them. Actually, it reminds me of, what was it? There's a movie coming out with, I think, Will Ferrell, and it's like him and his wife are at a ski resort, and they're doing a controlled avalanche. So they have these pipes that blast out, it's like it fires like a backfire or whatever, I don't know what you'd call it, which makes the snow, go nuts. So when the avalanche starts, he ditches his family and runs and hides. And this causes a familial dispute where she was like, you ran and left us behind? It's like she expected her husband to try and protect and save the family, but he dashed away. So I guess I bring this up because it's like, in a mainstream movie, the plot point is that men should be traditional, but that's toxic, and the wife is actually mad. So I guess, I don't know. I think it's interesting that we have this sort of duality, or maybe duality is not the right word, but paradox in mainstream pop culture, where you have all of these things saying men should behave a certain way, but then you simultaneously have other movies screaming not to behave a certain way.
Right.
how can anyone figure out what they're supposed to do?
Yeah. I think the answer is you ignore it all and you do what you want to do. You do.
That's what I do.
I want to be careful how I say this. Not necessarily what you want to do, because what you want to do is not necessarily something that's going to bring you meaning. But one of the things that every young guy has to figure out is, how's he going to put a dent in the universe, as one of my friends says. How's he going to do something that he can look back on? That's the much more important question. Is that you can do something that's difficult and valuable, not necessarily fun. Maybe it's fun too, but
I think a lot of guys want legacy. And so that's why a lot of these guys who go down the path that is incorrect become extremely dangerous and violent.
Mm-hmm.
Their path to legacy is evil.
Yeah,
but they want something.
And they're a very small group.
Right, of course.
But yeah, that's the extreme. If this contradiction and this ideology is taken to its extreme, that's where we end up.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. We do the show every Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., sometimes an hour or two. And we do have a full live recorded version of the show that includes a lot of comments and smaller segments you probably don't see. If you want to check that out, you can watch live at 8 p.m. Monday through Friday, or become a member of this channel. And for $5 a month, you get full access to all of the recorded podcasts. Every day after the show, we make them available in the community section of this YouTube channel. So don't forget to subscribe and stick around for more segments and more shows Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Thanks for hanging out, and we will see you all in the next show.